Welcome to Muddy River News this week. I'm Bob Gough. Jonathan Hoover is the Chief Public Defender for Adams County. He's new to the job and he's our guest. Welcome.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me.
I'm new to the job, but you've been an attorney a long time.
I have, and in fact, when I count it back sometimes I shake my head because I'm 1 year, I believe, 17.
Well, what enticed you to take this job?
So back when I went to law school in 2003, I decided my goal was always public interest, and so all of my law jobs and internships during law school were public defender jobs. And then upon graduation, I became a public defender and did that for almost 13 years.
Was that over in Marion County? Or where was that?
So Missouri's a little different, and so our office in Missouri covered actually 6 counties. So from all the way from Rawls County, New London, to all the way up to Cahokia, or Clark County, and then all the way west to Shelby County and Monroe County, so Paris and Shelbyville.
Sure.
That's how far.
Yeah,
a lot of traveling.
So while the county, while your square mileage is less, you've still got a large volume of work here in Adams County, Illinois, though. Yes,
and I will say I am excited that I now don't have to really leave the building very much.
What's your staff situation? I know you've had a lot of turnover, and again, that's nothing to say regarding the office. It's the legal profession in Adams County in general that's sort of just in a kind of a state of flux, isn't it?
It is, and it's also kind of shrinking, right? And so, thankfully, I've kind of gotten lucky in the sense that when Judge Pratt was Chief Public Defender, he actually filled a number of the positions. Mm-hmm. So there's only actually one position still left for me to fill. So I figure I'll have that filled in the next 30 to 60 days probably. I already have that kind of lined up, but otherwise I think we're in good shape.
It was funny because Judge Pratt joked about if somebody just looked at his resume at face value, they'd be like, oh, you had these 3 jobs in 5 months. What's up with that? You're kind of in that same boat, but not really. I mean, you were at Schmiedes Camp Law Firm, then you were at the Lemon Law Firm, and now you're doing this job. But I know many of your colleagues, and they all speak very highly of you and your skills, and they know this is a good fit.
Yes, and so what was interesting about that timeline, quite frankly, is so I left being a public defender in 2020, and then went into private practice at Schmiedes Camp, as you mentioned. And then after practicing there for almost 4 years is when James Lemon and I, he's one of my best friends, decided to form a partnership, form a new firm, and I joined it. And it was, I believe, the week before I officially announced it was when Todd Nelson resigned.
Yeah.
Right? And so, and everyone at that point, I got a number of people who were like, hey, are you going to go out for that? That'd be great for you. And I was like, no.
No, I just started this.
That's right. I just started this firm. We've done all this work. And so here we are. And then, of course, plus I shouldn't say I knew, that's too strong.
Right.
But I thought and I had hoped that Chris would get that job.
Sure.
Figured he would try. I know he was doing that whole thing with the state's attorney, so he had his other things going on.
Right.
But eventually, right, he gets it. So I continue doing my firm. And then obviously he gets made judge, it gets open again, and at that point there's a vacancy that they don't really know who's going to take it. Yeah. And so I had a lot of kind of support suggesting I should do it, so I thought about it a lot, thought about my roots and going back to, if I could do it and do it my way, how wonderful that would be. And so I decided to put in for it, and then I got it. So
when Judge Pratt took the chief PD job, he and I had talked, and he had said that I think there were some people who didn't apply previously for various reasons, and one of them because a lot of people wanted him to get it. But then when he, of course, was appointed judge, there were people. It's like, okay, well, now more people will apply, and you were one of the names that was mentioned in that mix. And I was thinking, knowing your background and knowing you were just going to work with James Lemon over at Hannibal, I'm like, well, John would be a great fit, but I know he just did this. Does he really want to? And then when you did, it's like, okay, well, it does make sense, even though, yeah, it's just all kind of in a real state of flux.
Yes, and I'll be honest, if it had probably been, 6 months later, I wouldn't have.
Sure.
Right? And it was one of those things where it was just early enough where I was like, I should. It's where I live. It's like where I live. I can do what I want to do. I mean, it's now or never. I can still kind of undo what's been done without too much difficulty and harm. And so here I am.
And I know we've got a little more, in the in kind of the moves on the chessboard or whatever. Should Judge Lannard, get her retention in November, that's going to create another judicial vacancy. They've sort of been waiting for that to be official. So then we'll have yet another attorney from our local pool who will end up being a judge. And then, as I look at our judges now, there's still another one or two who could at some point retire. But again, when you've got a shrinking pool of attorneys, that really shortens your bench for prospective judges.
Right, it does. And obviously that's one of those positions I think it's fair to say that a lot of us just kind of take for granted.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a judge, they follow the law, they ruled like they're supposed to. So as long as you do a good job, you try hard, you can, many people can fill that position. We've learned, right? It's very important who gets picked for all of those judgeships. So
no question about it.
And it makes it difficult, you're right, when our attorney pool and just our bar in general around here is shrinking.
So when in this office now, you come in. Obviously, years of experience as a public defender, and like you said, Judge Pratt, when he had the job, sort of did the heavy lifting of filling the vacancies after Todd Nelson resigned. So now yours here, and like you said, you've only got one more position to fill. What do you want? I mean, obviously, the public defender has one job, and that's to represent people who can't afford their own lawyers, or don't just choose not to hire their own lawyers. Besides that, what is kind of the focus of your office going to be?
So one of the things is there's different approaches, I'll just say, to, you can say defense, public defense, however you want to say it. I would generalize and say to all criminal defense. But I would say is there's different ways to approach it. And my way, and the way I've been trained, the way I've been practicing for all these years, is what I would call a more holistic approach. So a way to solve these problems kind of long term, and to get away from any kind of speedy, kind of short resolution that will just resolve a case today if we know it's going to come back tomorrow, right? An easy example of that I can think of over and over is where people are punished because they don't have a driver's license, for example, and which they should be. I'm not saying they shouldn't be punished, but if there's a way that we can kind of, that I can meet with these people and get them their license, that would solve the problem long term, as to, quite frankly, practically, which is a lot of them keep driving, which doesn't help anybody. Right?
Yeah.
But you know what I mean.
Rule one.
So one way to solve that problem is to just represent them on this single thing, get them to pay their fine, or get them on probation and then move along. And another way is to help them, for example, stop this problem from occurring. And that's an easy example. Other examples of that with drugs would be like getting them treatment, getting them to avoid and help them with their problem. Getting them employed, getting them to go to school. There's a number of factors. It's surprising what reduces recidivism. Some of it is not as kind of common sense as you would think, but like a very easy one and by easy I mean very common one, would be like getting a GED, right? That's something is that really part of my job in terms of representing a client? And it won't affect the defense, my legal defense, but I think it would help them long term and prevent them from getting into more trouble later. So for things like that is what I try to encourage, and to develop a stronger relationship with the clients.
Well, yeah, because I think that's a key part of your job should be, hey, okay, we got through this. I don't want to see you in here again.
Right.
You don't want repeat business.
Right.
You're like, most other businesses, hey, customers keep coming back. You want your customers to be one and done. Okay, did you figure it out? You learn your lesson? Great. Have a good life. I don't want to see you again. That's your job.
Right, and that makes they're happier.
Yeah.
And then, just like everyone else, I live here. This is my community, and when I see my clients out, nothing makes me happier than when they come up to me and say, like, I'm doing so great, John. I have a job. I'm doing X. Thank you so much. Now my life is so much better. Versus just like, sorry, John, I'm back. I did it again.
But and then again, the one sad part is, though, while a lot of this, and again, you can do certain things and you can control certain things, but some things you can't control. Like if you have to deal with state government on issues, and there's backlogs in mental health cases, or there's backlogs at DCFS or something like that, that all falls down. That's a problem you have to deal with when state government can't get the job done.
Right, and we all know
we could talk another 40 minutes.
Yeah, about the state government and that, and and that's fine. And but I agree, that's one of the problems. And one of the other issues is one of my goals, and I've already begun that in the few days I've started, is to foster more communication. I could even go stronger and say cooperation in the sense of working together to make things run smoothly. But I think things like that are important. It's important to have dialogue with, the county, with other departments in the county, with other individuals at the courthouse, the sheriff's department, to make sure everything is running the way it is. Nothing's worse than, like, for example, or frustrating to jurors too, where there's a jury trial set, everyone gets there, and for some reason it doesn't happen, right? And then my client doesn't get his day in court, right? And I want that as much as anybody. And so things like that, I think communication can avoid a lot of that, and then jurors can be much happier. I mean, no one's happy to serve on jury duty, right?
Right.
But at least nothing's, I think, worse than if they get there and then they're told, well, because of whatever reason, you have to come back tomorrow.
And I think that one of the things in doing this job that David and I do when we cover court, we've both covered courts and done this in this county for a lot of years. And again, I'm not blaming Adams County. I don't think this is an Adams County specific thing. But the wheels of justice do turn very slowly, it seems.
Yes. Well, and that's where, justice is a very complicated thing.
Yeah.
Right? Because on the one hand, there's a procedure and there's rules for a very good reason. Because what's the worst thing that can happen? Right? The absolute worst thing. An innocent person being convicted of something they didn't do. Right? That's it. And so we have all these protections to prevent that from happening. And those protections require, I'll just say, time, effort, and should not be skipped over or avoided, right? Or just ignored. And that's something that, at the cost of expediency, some people want that. And that's just my job, is to make sure that that doesn't happen.
And again, while you are in that courtroom and you look at the prosecution and the defense, and you're trying to work through all that with the state's attorney's office, but it's still, you want to have a congenial and working relationship with the state's attorney's office. That look, I understand, you're going to have some cases where your client, again, you're going to do your best for your client, but okay, my client, there's going to be some punishment here. And it's your job to work with the state's attorney's office to kind of come up with that solution, that alternative with a plea or through whatever. It was like, okay, last straw, we're going to court. Obviously, we've got a new state's attorney who's going to be coming in as well. But, you've worked with him, I'm sure, in the past, and he's been an assistant in that office for quite some time. Are you confident, and I guess confident or comfortable with the working relationship that currently exists between the PD's office and the state's attorney's office?
So I'll just say, I will improve it. I already have. Great. I have a good relationship with the state's attorney's office from my private practice, and people that know me will say that I'm talkative, I'm outgoing, and so I think those things help with that. But on the other hand, there's also parts of it's a job, right? And there's things that are going to happen. I mean, I don't think I'm overstating it to say my office and me will win trials against the state's attorney's office. Some people take that personally. Mm-hmm. If they do, there's not much I can do, right? On the other hand, we're all out there doing our job, right? And it's a very important job. And so that's where if that shouldn't be the reason, I think, that the offices don't get along.
No, I think it's like a ball game or anything else. Like, hey, and it's more serious than a ball game. I'm not trying to minimize it, but the same two. We got to do this again tomorrow. Same two teams play tomorrow. Right. So I'm going to win one, you're going to win one. We're going to do this, but in the end, we've got to be able to have this working relationship, because we're going to have many cases that we're going to come to loggerheads at, and we have to decide, okay, how can we make this work so we don't have to go to trial? And again, there's going to be winners and losers, and sometimes there's draws and ties. But again, it's your team is competing, lack of a better term, against the other team. But again, you're all trying to serve the public in one way or another. That's the bottom line.
Oh, that's exactly right. And we just don't have the same view sometimes of how that outcome should be.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine. That's why we have an adversarial justice system.
Yeah,
right?
and it's, again...
And it works.
And again, I mean, it's like, when, and you've all got to deal with, bringing in juries and, again, doing all that stuff. And, again, I guess the last thing to wrap up in, one of the issues that, comes up in Adams County, and I know has been talked about by, people in your office before you, got the post, was the preliminary hearing versus grand jury debate. Where do you stand on that?
So that's an interesting question, because I'll say why. So in Missouri, when I first began practicing in 2007, up until the current state's attorney, or prosecuting attorney is what they're called up there.
Right.
But when same took office in 2018, there were no grand juries. So I had preliminary hearings all the time. And by that I mean, if not weekly, bi-weekly, and I probably in 12 years did, hundreds, 500 maybe, if I had to count. So we did them all the time, okay? Then, now, when Luke Bryant took over, he did some grand jury, depending on case-by-case kind of basis, if he wanted to. And that worked fine also. I think it really came down to, it's a right that a defendant will have to have a preliminary hearing if there's not a grand jury. And so people give up their rights all the time, right? Which is fine, right? You go to court, everyone has a right to a trial. If you ask most people if they want a trial, they don't.
No.
Right?
No.
Anyone that's gotten a speeding ticket knows how that
Get
is.
me out of here with as little punishment or impact as
Can
possible.
you give me a break? Yeah. Can I get supervision? Something like that.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is a situation where work in the front of a case can resolve a lot of this. So if the state's attorney and the public defender's office, or any attorney, quite frankly, not that I'm giving advice to the private bar, but my point is that if things can be negotiated ahead of time, if agreements can be reached, or at least get most of the way there, then sure, right? Where it becomes an issue is just this idea that we just shouldn't have them, and with no benefit to the defendant. That to me seems problematic, right? But also, again, in the majority of cases, I would expect there would not be a preliminary hearing.
Sure.
But on the other hand, it's tough to tell one of my staff that they shouldn't have a preliminary hearing when the state's attorney's office, for example, in a specific case, wouldn't have recommended or given anything.
Right.
Right? It's like, why would you give up a right for no reason? Mm-hmm. That to me is a lot more difficult and a tougher question.
Yeah, and again, I think it's just because it used to be preliminary hearings were pretty prevalent around here on the Illinois side, and as of late it hasn't been. So I think that's the one thing that people who've covered courts for decades here, like David and myself and our team, we notice that. It's like, okay, and then of course, like you said, it got brought up earlier, and there was discussions on the issue. So I think, again, it's something you're coming at this with that perspective on, again, lots of experience on your own, but also from the other side of the river to say, okay, this, maybe we can make this work one way or another. So
yeah, and kind of the same way with that, the Safety Act changed a lot.
Yeah.
Pretrial releases changed a lot.
Yeah.
So the way that kind of the criminal case proceeded, even a few years ago, is altered significantly.
Sure.
And so this is another way that we just have to look at these things and figure out what's the best way for everyone that we can get through this.
Okay.
And,
Jonathan Hoover, thank you for your time. Best of luck in the position.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me here.
Sure. That's all the time we have for now. I'm Bob Gough. We'll see you next week.